The file you are about to hear has been thoroughly scrutinized by the Ethics Committee and approved by the O5 Council for release to trusted associates of the Foundation. This is SCP Unredacted. I cannot recall my first thought, but I do remember standing in the presence of a cairn, no taller than my shoulder. Glowing green grass ebbed and flowed around what was little more than a haphazard pile of stones in the center of an endless expanse. Even in such rudimentary structures, there is craftsmanship, a level of precision that if it was any other way, even if a single stone was out of place, the entire pillar would simply collapse in on itself. A cacophony of noise and visuals as stone, devoid of purpose, dissolved into nothingness. And yet, here it stands, perfect in its unstable equilibrium, working exactly as designed, with not a piece out of place amidst the simmering chaos. This cairn, however, was built by William Katzman. I think of his name, and information rushes in to fill the void where a person once wasn't. Katzman will be an architect, one of the grandest in the... I never had the pleasure of making his acquaintance, although this fact makes me uncomfortable, and as such, it is decided that we met 13 years ago in this very same field. I do not recall my first thought, but I do recall my conversation with Katzman. I look back to the cairn, and it is a stone brick tower, sprawling to the infinity above me, much as it had been those 13 years ago. Katzman was a charismatic man with a great passion for what he did. He talked for hours about architecture and very little of anything else. As he leaned on his first creation, he described wonders spanning the... He spoke of skyscrapers, of boulders, of castles stretching beyond perception, and of esoteric structures whose sole purpose was merely to exist. I stood as they appeared around me, each a masterwork in their own right. Tessellated bricks and patterns that swooped and glid through the air effortlessly. Patterns dizzyingly complex, shifted and churned within vast walls until I could imagine no more. It was a marvel to behold, but soon, Katzman and I ran out of things to talk about, and he was no more. And yet, I do not recall my first thought. I imagine a time before my conversation with Katzman, and it has happened. History abhors a vacuum. 15 years ago, long before I had conceived of the architect, I wandered across a bridge of light spanning the cosmos. The majesty of 1,000 stars surrounded me, bathing me in their warm starshine as I strolled from here on to forever. An eternity passed. The stars burned into nothing. I simply walked into the darkness and contemplated, thinking every thought there is to be had, of being, of the endless expanse around me, of the singularity. The specifics of these thoughts elude me, but this does not make me uncomfortable. They are irrelevant to the experience. And yet, this is not my first thought. I look back and experiences fill the gap as fast as I can remember them. 16 years ago, I saw a butterfly fly past me, dancing between sunbeams. 45 years ago, I spoke for millennia about philosophy and maths with nobody important. Of the wonders of existence, I can no longer remember. 378 years ago, I stood among jagged spires as the sun beat down above me in a desert of my own design. 1,000,000 years ago, I stood in front of a cairn and marveled at how something so irregular could hold itself together. And yet, I cannot recall my first thought. Dizzyingly fast, I search, further and further back, in the vain hope to find what I am looking for. Panic explodes within my chest as more and more memories I've never thought of before fill the void where time wasn't. I struggle to keep my head above the tide as memories flood in. I remember doing everything I'd ever wanted to. I remember doing everything I'd never want to do. I remember every permutation of every sequence of events that could ever happen. But there is still more. There is never a first. This realization knocks me to my knees as the field around me dissolves into a featureless void. Why do I not have a first thought? Why have I always been? Why does this feel imperfect? Elsewhere, a single stone falls out of a cairn. It begins to tip.
Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, join my Discord community, hire me on Fiverr, or help support me by becoming a patron for as little as $3 a month. Regardless of tier, all patrons get early access to every single episode. The links are in the description. I don't have the talent it takes to write a skip. All I do is read. Original authors make this podcast possible, so credit to the original author. Their links in the description. Show them some love as well. Consider becoming a member of the SCP Wiki. Upvote their work and maybe write a skip of your own. Maybe I'll read it here someday. You never know if you never try. The content of this podcast and content relating to the SCP Foundation, including the SCP Foundation logo, is licensed under Creative Commons Sharealike 3.0, and all concepts originate from scpwiki.com and its authors. This recording, being derived from this content, is hereby also released under Creative Commons Sharealike 3.0.